Welcome to the channel. I'm currently doing a series on Irish ghost stories. If you like the video, please terrify the like button and subscribe. And always, stay scary. The Irish Banshee. The Banshee or fairy woman is a famous Irish foreteller of death. She is a female ghost or spirit that is either seen or heard or both, and it's always a bad omen. Usually the Banshee foretells the death of a close friend or relative of the person witnessing the Banshee. Sometimes the Banshee can foretell devastating loss in battle, resulting in many deaths. The word Banshee is a composite of two Irish words, ban, which means woman, and she, which loosely means fairy. The word she is spelled S-I, father, which is an accent. Usually this word fairy in Irish mythology and literature means a supernatural, otherworldly being with either benevolent or malicious intent. Now, a banshee is not always evil, but always foretells a death and can be terrifying for those who witness her ghost-like appearance and hear her howling cries. Usually the sound of a banshee is described as a keening or a wailing, which is a mourning sound, but tales often tell of a soft, gentle singing, or even a terrifying owl-like screech. Banshees can appear as a small, old, frail woman with white hair, or as a tall, beautiful young woman with either fair or red hair. Often they are not seen at all, but only heard. The first mention of a banshee in Irish literature is in a book written in 1380 called The Triumphs of Turlough. In the book, the defeat of an Irish army is foretold by a decrepit and frail old woman washing bloody limbs and heads in a lake. Everyone who witnesses this washerwoman would later meet their death in battle. It's interesting to note that in Scotland, a banshee is often called a ban níoch, which means washerwoman. In a very similar story, a group of Norman soldiers came across an old hag washing their bloody armour and clothes in a stream. The next day, these Norman knights would be massacred by the Irish clans at the Battle of Dizert O'Dee. Maiden and the O'Neills. A very powerful Irish clan called the O'Neills was often visited by a banshee who was called Maiden, which means little Maeve. This banshee, a small and frail old woman, was sighted many times at Shane's Castle, County Antrim, foretelling a death in the clan. Ailill and the O'Briens. Another very powerful Irish family were the O'Briens. They were the Lords of Thomond, which is in modern-day County Clare. Their headquarters was Bunratty Castle, which is a very popular tourist destination today. The O'Briens were often visited by a banshee called Ailill. The first time Ailill appeared to the O'Briens was the night before the Battle of Clontarf in 1014, where she prophesied the death of the legendary Irish warrior Brian Boru. The next day, Brian Boru led the Irish armies to victory against the Vikings. Brian was killed in the battle, thus fulfilling the prophecy of the Banshee. Now, Ailill was more than just a Banshee. She was formerly a goddess of the Dalcassians, which were the ancestors of the O'Briens. And then she ended up becoming a guardian spirit for the O'Briens. Like I said, banshees not always evil. It's said that she had no less than 25 female spirits or banshees assisting her in the task. And she lived in a cave at Carriglea or Grey Rock in County Clare. The Ghost of a Maiden. Another well-documented banshee story also pertains to the O'Briens. It was written by an English noblewoman called Lady Anne Fanshawe in 1649 when she and her husband were staying at the O'Brien Castle in Clare. She writes that late one night, around 1 o'clock, she was awoken by a ghostly figure that passed through her window. She was all white with red hair and had a pale and ghastly complexion. The banshee called out loud to her 3 times and then, and I quote, "with a sigh more like the wind than breath, vanished, and her body seemed more like a thick cloud than substance." The next morning, Lady Anne Fanshawe explained to the hostess what had happened. The lady of the house explained to her that this was indeed a banshee and since her cousin had died that very night, the Banshee foretold his death. She told her that this Banshee was the ghost of a young woman who was murdered on the grounds many centuries ago, and her body was flung into the nearby river. The young woman was murdered by the head of the O'Brien clan after she became pregnant with his child. Ever since the murder, this Banshee appeared the night before a death in the family. The Duckett's Grove Banshee. Duckett's Grove Castle in County Carlow is one of the most spectacular castles in Ireland. It was built in 1830 in a Gothic revival style by William Duckett. He was a wealthy landowner and a descendant of William the Conqueror. The castle was destroyed in a fire in 1933, the cause of which was never discovered. Local legend has it that the ruined castle is inhabited and haunted by a banshee. The banshee is said to be the ghost of a young servant woman who was seduced and abandoned by William Duckett. In grief, she took her own life, and the mother of the young woman is said to have cast a curse on the family in an act of revenge. The banshee appeared several times to a housekeeper of the castle, and the woman was so terrified that she fled the castle and refused to ever return. The banshee once appeared to a groundskeeper, foretelling the death of his mother, who died the following day. On another occasion, the banshee was heard howling from the highest tower of the castle for a full 2 days. A woman who was walking on the grounds shortly after suddenly dropped dead, and the wailing was heard no more. It is also rumoured that the banshee was responsible for the fire that consumed the castle in 1933. The banshee was heard wailing as the flames rose, and the spirit of a young woman was seen dancing in the blaze. The castle at Duckett's Grove is said to be one of the most haunted places in Ireland, and there are many more accounts of supernatural phenomena here. The Veiled Banshee. I remember as a child being told a story about my uncle who was walking home one cold and blustery night. He was probably quite drunk, having partaken of a snifter of whiskey to keep the cold out. After arriving home, he explained to my grandmother how he had tried to comfort an old woman whom he had met along the way. Describing her, he said she was dressed in black with a veil over her face, and she was crying and wailing outside my grandmother's house. Every time he went closer to her, she moved away but kept pointing at the house. Now my grandmother, with all her knowledge of the old Irish legends, knew exactly what this woman represented. But she hurried my uncle to bed, assuring him that she would go outside and look for the old woman herself. Needless to say, she didn't dare do such a thing. Sure enough, 3 days after this strange encounter, my grandmother's brother died peacefully in his sleep. As children, we pestered my uncle to recount the story of the night he nearly invited the banshee home for tea. So that's it for today, guys. If you liked the video, please terrify the like button and subscribe to the channel. And please let me know, what do you think of the banshee? Do these stories fill you with dread? Do you believe in banshees, or do you think it's just an old Irish fairy tale? Do you have any banshee stories of your own, or God forbid, have you ever been unlucky enough to have an encounter with a banshee? Would love to hear your thoughts, guys, so please comment down below. And until next time, stay scary.